Oh, there you are. Oh my gosh. Okay.
All right, here we are. Hi,
Yes. Hi.
good to be here.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
this is a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thank you.
I've been thinking about doing like something like this for a while, so this is a perfect uh, time to get it going.
Cool. Thank you for being here. Do you want to like introduce yourself and just like a little intro about what you do and is in regards to astrology and stuff?
Yeah, sure. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Khefreun. I've been doing astrology for about 10 years, and I practice a lot of various mystic traditions, meditations, yoga, and then I'm also an artist and musician and performer. And so I kind of like combining all of those things um, into a single beautiful expression. And so doing astrology is something I'm very passionate about, and especially in regard to helping people understand just how to navigate these very stressful and confusing times.
Thank you so much. Let's see. I'm gonna like turn up my volume because someone said that they could see us, but they can't hear us. So that's just weird. I mean, we could
Okay.
just keep
I'll try to
going.
speak a little louder too.
Okay, sweet. So,
Okay.
what are some like important aspects that are happening right now that you think we should know about?
Okay, so there are four major things taking place right now, astrologically speaking, that I'm going to be discussing. The first is Venus retrograde in Gemini. Now, this is probably on a lot of people's minds. If anybody who is interested in astrology or follows astrology, you've probably heard that Venus has gone retrograde, which means that when a planet goes retrograde, its normal path forward, due to the rotational differences in the orbits, a planet will appear to move backwards in the sky as we look at it. It's not actually moving backwards, but it just appears that way to us on Earth. And astrologically, when retrogrades take place, this kind of influence is an internalization of that planet's natural energy. So whatever that given planet is, so for example, with Venus, Venus rules our relationships, it rules our desires, it rules our feel goods, and the ways which we experience and share happiness with others. And so as Venus goes retrograde, all of those topics and themes are being internalized, meaning that all of the outwards expressions or relationships and stuff that we've been having, we're now having to process them inwardly within our psyches in order to better understand how to actualize them in life. So the biggest theme about this Venus retrograde in Gemini, as I see it, is the idea of trust. Because as we're all experiencing right now, whether it be personally or collectively, as we look into the world, as we see what's going on in the world, there's just a complete breakdown in truth, in believability, in and in what's actually trustworthy. And so understanding what trust is and how we can better cultivate it in our own lives is essential. It's not just a good thing, it's an essential detail in making a better world for one another and for ourselves on a personal level. So basically anything we trust is something that we say, this idea is, I am giving it an objective truth. I believe this. You can have a lot of ideas. You can hear the idea the earth is flat and you can say, oh, well, that's a bunch of garbage. Like, I don't believe that. That's not true. I don't trust that. But an idea that comes into your head and you say, oh, okay, I think I believe that. It doesn't even matter why. You don't have to have a good reason to trust a thing. It could be for just because it came out of a certain source's mouth that you trust, like you trust this person, therefore anything they say is trustworthy, or vice versa. Your bias could confirm negatively and say, oh, I hate this person, therefore I don't trust anything that comes out of their mouth. So right then and there, the idea of trust being a subjective thing, the things we trust, the things we regard as true, being a subjective thing, is what makes integrating trust with others such a difficult thing. Because at any given moment, each of us can be saying that something is true when it actually isn't. And based upon our spectrum of believability, as each of us personally experiences it, that will determine what we accept as truth and what we accept as false. And so people who are aware of that, people who are conscious of that, and people who have ill intentions use that in order to gain power and to manipulate people. Like, so for example, I don't know if anyone's ever seen the documentary The Great Hack on Netflix, but it's basically about how this company, Cambridge Analytica, used Facebook data to target people who are specifically susceptible to manipulation and then flood them with advertisements about Trump and his presidency. And all of those people, the data shows that all of them were completely swayed and manipulated by this information warfare. And that's why we're living in the world we live in, because of this this covert manipulation of information and trust in our country. And so with Venus retrograde, we're experiencing the inevitable breakdown of our relationships and social systems due to that lack of trust. Without that trust, we cannot function on individual levels with our friends and coworkers and spouses. We cannot function on collective levels with our governments and our economies and other countries and peoples of the entire world. We need to be able to establish a fundamental basis of trust. And in order to do that, we all need to be speaking the same language. And not literally the same language, but we all need to have we need to update our methods and means of communicating with one another in order to achieve this level of truth transference. And so, a good example of this is I was reading on Reddit the other day on an aliens subreddit about how someone was asking the question, is it possible for me to contact aliens up in space using some sort of DIY build my own radio kit? And one of the replies said, aliens don't communicate like that. Aliens communicate telepathically. So it's really easy to do. All you have to do is get into a meditative state. And he explained how to telepathically communicate with ET. And the OP's response was, oh, I was raised very Christian. Therefore, I'm really afraid, and I'm not going to allow myself to go there. And so if you're unwilling to take the steps necessary to establish a new means of communication, one that you maybe to learn a new language, then you're going to be shooting yourself in the foot when it comes to your own ability to discern truth from falsehoods. Because if you're not able to speak the language of your community, you're not going to be able to establish a coherence with them.
So is that kind of like what's going on right now with Venus and retrograde? It's like pushing us to learn how to communicate with our communities and what kind of like we define as trust, and also like maybe it's forcing us to deconstruct that and like maybe build trust?
Yes, very much so. Because in order to trust someone else, in order to be able to intuitively discern this person is saying something that's true versus this person is saying something they think is true, which may not actually be true. So people can be engaged in disinformation innocently, unwittingly, just because what they think is true is actually false. But so they're not trying to lie to you. They're just spreading a lie that they heard and accepted without any sort of critical thinking mechanism. And I think that's actually the key to being able to establish trust is critical thinking. Being able to take an idea when it's presented to you and to pull it apart and to analyze it, to understand who is saying it to you, why they're saying it to you, what's the intention behind this, what is this information trying to get me to do, what is this information trying to get me to believe. Is this information sponsored? Is somebody paying this person to tell me this? And so all of those kind of questions give you a better understanding of how to discern truth from fictions. And so in our personal relationships, with Venus going retrograde right now, our ability to process information, specifically when it comes from other people, because our biases filter and distort information from people in such very extreme ways. And whether that's people we dislike, or if, especially with people we really like, the people who we really love and care for, we give them a great weight of truth and believability, regardless of whether or not they've earned it, regardless of whether or not they can demonstrate principles of what they're saying being true or not. Our love and caring for them extends that beyond what is appropriate at times. So this is a time to be suspending trust, but also expectations of mistrust. So to be suspending all of your judgments and biases altogether in order to learn how to process information coming into you objectively. And so this means reevaluating your biases, reevaluating your personal likes, your dislikes. Like, so for example, you know, the other day I was at the grocery store and I saw these spring rolls that I don't normally get, because way back in my memory, I remember having those spring rolls and I didn't like them, or somebody told me they were bad. I don't even remember why I came to this particular conclusion, but as I was sitting there looking at it, I realized, wait a minute, so I haven't gotten these because I made some sort of prejudgment about it. I'm going to suspend that judgment. I'm going to give it a try. And lo and behold, I actually come to like it. So your ability to reevaluate and reassign your own preferences regarding, you know, anything from is insignificant to the food you eat to the people who are in your life. Like, that's a very important process for our personal and collective evolution. So yeah, so the next big motion and event taking place is that Mars just moved into Pisces, and this forms a square with Venus and Gemini. They're both mutable signs. And so as Mars moves through Pisces, as Venus moves backwards through Gemini, they're going to be forming this square for a long time. And so the tensions between these energies is going to prolong this disillusionment that we have been experiencing collectively. So basically, I see this aspect as the manifestation of the quarantine, that this social isolation is forcing us to internalize. It's forcing us to not ignore those biases and those personal constructs that define our worlds. You know, whereas before, if we're wrapped up in our jobs, if we're wrapped up in other people, it's easy to just ignore those things. It's easy to just forget that they're there entirely. And so this is a very important time to be internalizing. So Mars in Pisces, Mars is your willpower. It's the part of you that makes decisions. It's the part of you that says, go here, do this, like talk to this person, be this thing, like I want this, I want that. It's the part of you that drives and directs you forward. The energy of Pisces, the symbol that I see for Pisces is the distillment process. When you distill a liquor, or when you distill an essential oil, what you're doing is you are concentrating the inner components of physical matter into spirit. That's why they call alcohol spirits, is because the distillation process strips away the heavy matter until all that's left is the most potent and essential qualities of whatever object you've just distilled. So Pisces represents the distillation process. It represents the disintegration of the heavy mortal and material parts of us that then releases the inner spiritual nature, our true essence that is undefined by the physical boundaries of the world. And so combining that with the energy of Mars, what that means is that our will, our ability to make decisions, our ability to know who we really are on the inside, is being stripped of all of those things that no longer serve us. And so this is at first this is a very confusing process, because in order for this to take place, all of the things that you've built of yourself need to go. You need to completely dissolve away, like very hardwired and static portions of your personality, of your behaviors, and of your decision-making process. You know, we become very accustomed to doing the same things over and over and over again. And in order to become something else, we need to initiate the removal and the letting go of those old things that prevent the new growth. Like when you weed a garden, the weeds aren't inherently bad; they're plants too. But if you want the food to grow, you have to clear up that space. You have to have a fresh blank bed of soil to put your food in. And so you can't grow a garden if it's overgrown and tangled with weeds and vines. And so with Mars in Pisces, with Venus in Gemini, so for the next month or so, this is going to be happening until about June 26th, is when both Venus goes direct and Mars moves into Aries. So until that point, I think there's going to be further and a deepening of the confusion and of the disillusionment processes that have already begun. And a part of the importance of this process is facing any sort of sadness, madness, sorrow, all of those things that you're really, really afraid of. Go towards them. Don't resist those things. Stare them in the eye and face them head on. And if need be, let them destroy you. Let yourself and everything you knew yourself to be, just let it go for a little while. And what you're going to discover is that what remains after that is a much better version of who you are. And you'll find that those things that used to be limiting you before don't anymore, because you went through this catharsis process. You know, crying and tears physiologically is an extremely healthy and vital process for your body to undergo and to relieve emotional stress. And so if all of us just took a little bit of time every day to just cry for like a minute, we'd all be healthier. We'd all be happier. We'd all be freer of the burdens that carry around with us for so long.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. And so the other really big thing happening right now is that Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto, almost at the same time, have also all gone retrograde in the sign of Capricorn. Now, Saturn just moved into Aquarius, but this retrograde period will take it back into Capricorn for a little while, and then it'll move on later on this year. But for this particular thing, what that's doing to us on a collective level is we are seeing a complete systems failure of institutions of authority. Capricorn represents institutions in general, because institutions act as gates of power within our social structures. So it's universities who decides who gets degrees and gets to become doctors. It's doctors who decide who is sick and who is well and how to treat them. It's the governments who decide this is lawful, this is not lawful, this is how we're going to utilize our resources. And so these institutions of authority, these decision makers, the way these systems are designed is inherently self-terminating. And by that, I mean that the operations that these institutions use to keep themselves going, they're eating themselves. And so when we look into the world, when we look at just this massive failure in terms of the pandemic response, in terms of leadership and competence, in terms of it extends into this lack of trust in a collective social sense, that we can't trust a single authority who tells us anything anymore, because we have like umpteen different news sources saying this is true and this is true, but those things are opposite each other, and trusted authorities are telling us opposite things are true. It's madness. It's absolute social madness. And this is a really essential because the reason that these things have been going for so long is because we have been, to various degrees, playing along. We've been playing the game. We've been allowing these authorities to have their finger on the button, and have been allowing them to misuse that power. And so in the tarot, the card, the Tower, represents any structure that you have built. If it is not built in accordance with nature's designs, it is inevitable that it will collapse upon its own weight. And so with Jupiter and Saturn and Pluto and Capricorn, for the last number of years, we're seeing the culmination of a cataclysmic systems failure in these institutions of authority. And so the reason that this happened, the reason that it's the worst case, at least in the United States. In the United States, it's the worst case scenario. Some other countries handled this pandemic relatively well. You know, they had very quick response times. They had a cohesion between government and medical facilities that was able to properly create triage mechanisms within hospitals. Our country didn't. The United States just completely failed from the top down. Everything that was supposed to be in place was not, and there was not a good reason for it. And the reason all of that is in the first place, the reason it got this bad, is because of a collective resistance to change and a fear of the future. Pluto, in particular, Pluto's the main driver in this Capricorn conjunction right now. Pluto represents evolution. It represents the fact that nature is constantly changing, and that in order for us to live within nature, to live in harmony with it, we need to be constantly changing and adapting as well. And so the reason that cataclysm takes place is because along the way, where little changes, little progresses can be made, slight adjustments to the trajectory can alter our course for the better. Those things weren't done at the right time. You know, we should have been addressing climate change a decade ago. We're like 20 years behind the curve on addressing climate change. We're 50 years behind the curve on addressing the economy. We're living in economic systems that were designed hundreds of years ago. We're living in legal systems that were designed hundreds of years ago. We're living under governments that were designed 300 years ago. And so the people in power are incentivized to keep their power. They don't want any of that to change. And so they've pretty much proven by now that they're not going to. They are going to continue resisting the change despite how bad it gets, which forces each of us as individuals to personally reevaluate, wait a second, who am I letting make my rules? Are they worthy of that? Are they doing a good job? Could someone else do that job better? Could I do that job better? And so because of the external systems failure of authority institutions, this is forcing all of us as individuals to take upon personal authority to make our lives better. We can't wait for governments. We can't wait for the economy to fix itself. We can't wait for some hero to fly in on a white horse and magically make everything better. Each of us bears a personal responsibility to build a better world for ourselves, to take back authority that we have mistakenly given to those who don't deserve it, and to learn how to wield power with responsibility in our own lives. A big part of this is also resource management. A big reason that so many people are experiencing scarcity in the world today is because of the falsification of scarcity. Basically, if a thing is scarce, it makes it more valuable. Therefore, if I'm a producer of a good, I'm incentivized to artificially make scarce my product so that I can charge you more for it. And so this is why phones are designed to die after a year so that they can sell you the next model. When Thomas Edison first invented the light bulb, the very first one he invented would never die. It would go on forever, just an eternal light bulb. But when he was getting his funding from JP Morgan, the bank industrialist, Morgan said, look, make that thing break after a little while so that we can get people to keep buying more of them. And so that's what he did. So that's why light bulbs break, is because of an economic incentivization to make resources scarce. And so a big part of collectively making the world a better place is more properly utilizing resources. You know, so with these bailouts that they're writing, all of this money is going to these big companies who don't need it. All of this money is being wasted in places where there's lack and scarcity over here. If you just sent it over here, then it would be fine. And so while that's happening collectively, that's also happening personally with each of us. And so this is a time for each of us to be becoming aware of what it is we possess, how we're using it, and is that the best use for it. Minimizing waste in your life creates abundance. The less that you're misusing, the more you have to properly use. And this gives you power. And so with power comes responsibility. With responsibility comes more power, and there's a exponential growth in that. So to sum up, even though that these times are very challenging and that there seems to be a great deal of confusion, all of this is leading to better, stronger us on individual and collective levels. You know, I think this has been a long time coming. These collapses and disintegrations of these systems are necessary, and their disappearance will allow the new things to grow. And so it comes down to each of us individually. So what are we going to put there? We need to have something ready. So as this collapse is taking place, as we are internalizing, as we are sorting out our mess, as we're weeding the gardens of our minds and hearts, it's time to be envisioning something new. It's time to be envisioning what to put in place of all of that is better, that is different. We can't use old solutions for new problems. We have to innovate. We have to think outside of our own biases and preferences. And we have to reevaluate our decision-making process and the way we perceive and share truth.
Awesome. That was really good information. So those were the most kind of dominant aspects happening right now? Yeah.
Those are the major planetary shifts that have just taken place. Awesome. So the outer planets, Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto, their retrogrades last from 5 to 7 months. So those will be going on for the next half year or so. Venus will go direct June 26th, something around that. Don't quote me on that. And then Mars goes into Aries at that same time. So like I say, so around then, we're going to, all of the tension that this confusion has been building is going to be like a slingshot. That as soon as Venus goes direct, as soon as Mars is in Aries, all of that confusion is going to be burned away. It's going to be disintegrated. We're going to be left with a pure version of ourselves, which will be more functional. We will have a more powerful intuition to guide our decision-making processes, and we will be free of our biases so that we will actually be able to see new visions for new systems that we build ourselves. We don't need authorities. We don't need a top-down people telling us what to do, when to do it. We can do it ourselves. We can establish new economies. We can establish barter and trade economies. You know, doing these live streams is a perfect example of this is the first time I'm doing this. This is the first time I'm sharing astrology over this. So this is a perfect example of innovating a communication method in order to create a sense of social cohesion and connectivity.
Yes, awesome. So, you offer one-on-one astrology readings for people that might be interested, right?
Yes,
Cool.
yes. Yeah, my rates are $35 for an hour. I'm also open to trade or sliding scale if you need. And then also you can check out my YouTube page at Skyofwonder at YouTube. And check out some of my music and art on my own page here on Instagram.
Yeah, Sky of Wonder is the YouTube, and there's definitely some good information on astrology and some planets in general, some um, entities out there. I remember a video of Chiron, so definitely go to the Sky of Wonder. And thank you so much for being here. And maybe next time when things go direct, we could touch base again.
Yeah, definitely. Let's do it
Awesome.
again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.